Damos paso a los panelistas. Cinch Monson, vicepresidente comercial de desarrollo de Oberon Fuels de Estados Unidos. Juan Francisco Richards, gerente de desarrollo y nuevos negocios de empresas Gasco de Chile. El señor James Rockwell, CEO de la World LPG Association, quien viene desde Francia como moderador de esta sesión.
Well, good morning, everybody. Sorry, it's back to English, so please bear with me. And I think actually looking at this panel, it might be quite an English-speaking panel, apart from Juan Francisco. Yeah. So, look, thank you for your continued participation. There's a full room here on the second day, which is great to see. Yeah, and thank you, Pedro, for that great presentation. I think it gave us a really good introduction to the subject, and it touched on quite a lot of the points that I think we are going to talk about. And we are going to talk about renewable LPG. Renewable LPG is almost a contradiction in terms if you think about it. If it's LPG, by definition, is petroleum, and how can it be renewable petroleum? And one of the things I'd like to discuss today is that very issue, because we confuse the hell out of people when we try to talk about this. We understand it in our own industry, but as soon as we get outside and we talk to policymakers, there's a sense of, I'm sorry, what are you talking about? So that's something to think about. So I want to talk about the potential for this new, let's say, source of propane and butane, and we've looked at the global developments. We probably touched on that a bit more. A bit of housekeeping. I want to make this a conversation. I don't really want to make this too structured, so I'm going to ask each of you for your own thoughts, and then we'll go into a kind of Q&A. I'd like you to think about asking each other questions, all right? I'd also like the audience to get involved if you want to. I know there's an app, but it's, I'm not sure, I don't even have my phone with me, so I'm not sure that's going to work very well. I would suggest if anybody does have a question, then they just come up to the front here and they can ask it, if that's okay with the organization. And I'll invite you at a certain point in the discussion to come up if anybody wants to ask a question. Now, what's important to know about renewable LPG? Let me just give my own sense on this before we get into the discussion. Decarbonization is the future, okay? You cannot escape that wherever you are in the world. It'll go at different paces, but it is the future. As of the middle of this year, we calculate that countries that emit 70% of the world's greenhouse gases have pledged to cut them out to net zero completely by the middle of this century, by 2050. That means the elimination of about 30 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent every year. And the 30% that haven't agreed to that will probably going to be cutting their carbon emissions anyway, even if it doesn't go down to zero. The energy sector accounts for about 80% of those emissions. So you can imagine that there is a lot of pressure on the shoulders of the energy industry to respond to this challenge. And of course, the LPG industry is going to feel that as well. Now, we as an organization, WLPGA, we recognize this. We've stepped forward to become, we think, part of the solution by highlighting that renewable LPG, although it's only right now produced in modest quantities, could potentially satisfy up to 50% of total fuel demand, LPG fuel demand, by 2050. So we've developed a number of scenarios, and all of this is available on our website, by the way. The studies that we've done show that essentially the supply of renewable LPG can be sourced from 8 renewable feedstocks in 8 main pathways. I'm not going to go into all the details of that. But those pathways, with that feedstock, or those feedstocks, could produce about 220 million tons of renewable propane and butane by 2050. Now, it's based on some assumptions around feedstock availability, but those estimates have been essentially endorsed by the International Energy Agency and the International Renewable Energy Agency. Okay? So it's not pie in the sky what we're saying. We also base this calculation on yields. Pedro, you were talking about the yield basically coming from biodiesel and sustainable aviation fuel, and it worked out to be about 5% from what I gathered from what you said. So we essentially have looked at the same kind of yields. So our 220 million tons is based on a realistic yield. Right now, we only have two real pathways, hydrotreating and oligomerization. Oligomerization, there you go, it's a complicated word, isn't it? The others are right now in development. Now, just quickly and lastly on this, when we talk about 50% of future demand, of course, that depends on what future demand is. So 220 million tons being 50% of future demand implies future demand is 440 million tons. But that is very unlikely. All the scenarios that we look at shows a declining demand, not even flat demand. In the long term, energy efficiencies, other energies that are coming in, it's likely that the demand overall for the molecules is probably going to decline. So if we get to 220, there's actually a chance that we could produce 100% of global demand by 2050. Governments across the world are pushing us to do this, and the only reason really we're doing this is because governments are doing it. But it's important that we try to find the right balance between decarbonization, investment, operating costs, and convenience. And I think it's really important to remember that because it's a balance that we all have to understand together with government. I think there is a cause for optimism. I think we've got a bright future with potentially high volumes, but we've got to be careful that we do not get complacent, that there's this sense that the scenario itself is reality, because it's not. This scenario will only happen if we make big investments as an industry and if we have cooperation from governments. So that's just my introduction to the whole thing. What I'd like to do is pass over the mic to our panelists and ask them each to just give their own perspectives on this subject. Pedro, I won't start with you because you've given a great presentation, but I may come back to you if you want to add something after the other two have spoken. But Juan Francisco, let me start with you, and you give us your thoughts on renewable or synthetic, perhaps in your case, LPG.
Yes, thank you. Well, I will go in English just to not make the people put it on and out. Yes, I mean, in Gasco we're working in to put it in the Pedro's nomenclature, in a power-to-X renewable LPG, without the P, but that's something. And it's a synthetic renewable LPG. That means that we are working in a project that takes renewable electricity, then makes hydrogen, then methanol, and then from methanol we synthesize gasoline and LPG. Well, not we, because we are participating in the project, and the name of the project is Haruoni. I don't know if you have heard about it. It's a project that is located in the southern Chile, in the Chilean Patagonia, and it's a very interesting project. And as I say, it's really challenging the technology, because from one side we can say that okay, electrolysis for hydrogen is known. Even methanol to gasoline is also quite known, as you mentioned. But to have really a renewable propane that is renewable, you need three things. You need renewable electricity, renewable carbon, and it's not exactly renewable, but you need a sustainable source of water. And those three things you have to manage. And in the case of HIF project, for example, the carbon, water is not an issue in the Patagonia, but the thing is where to get the carbon. And definitely they are trying at the beginning to capture from the atmospheres. That's a really, really technology question in the issue. But they are also researching about other sources of carbon. And we are expecting, this is a project that have at least 2 phases in Chile. The first one is a pilot phase that is almost ready, and at the end of December we have the inauguration of the plant, and we expect to have the first ton of renewables, e-fuels we call it, because the E came from electricity, and we expect to have the first ton at the end of this year or beginning of the next. So we are really, really in the final stage, and then we expect to have a really commercial stage with big amounts in 3 to 5 years more. And
Okay, thanks, Juan Francisco. There's loads of questions about this, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But let's just carry on with the introductions from everybody, then we'll come back to some of those questions. So, Cinch, over to you.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Alejandro, for the invitation to speak. I had the privilege of speaking last year, the honor of speaking, and thank you for having me back. When I was asked to speak last year, I was working for the Propane Education and Research Council, and I've since moved to Oberon Fuels. So I've been working on renewable LPG, or renewable LNG, we won't say P, but for many years. And in the process, I kind of came across Oberon Fuels, renewable DME, and saw the opportunities it creates for the LPG industry. And so I made the move, and today I'm working on this front. Oberon Fuels has been in business for 11 plus years, based out of California, producing renewable DME. And over that time, we have worked with numerous companies like Volvo, Mack, Ford, other vehicle companies, to look at how our DME fits into their vehicle operations. But through the course of that, it became clear that LPG blending is an important market. And because of the value I see in LPG, I have a real passion for rural America, or rural economies in general around the world, and clean energy, and I see a real opportunity here. So what we do in our process is we take multiple feedstocks, organic wastes, which can be animal waste, animal manure from agriculture operations, cellulosic wastes that can include any sort of byproducts of crop farming or pulp and paper milling, wood harvesting, forestry, I guess, and convert that into renewable DME. Our first target is we want to help the LPG industry decarbonize and become a more renewable fuel. That sets a foundation for taking the LPG industry into new markets. One of the things that's very interesting, in my opinion, about our DME, it's an excellent hydrogen carrier. And if the LPG industry is handling our DME, all of a sudden, the hydrogen economy, the hydrogen infrastructure, which is non-existent, overnight can have a well-built out infrastructure through the LPG industry. So by making a move to renewable fuels, the LPG industry can open a world of new markets. One last thing I want to mention, and then I'll stop talking, but is that by taking all those different renewable feedstocks, James talked about 8 different pathways, 8 different feedstocks. Every one of those, in that case, 64 different potential sources of renewable LPG, similar thing applies to renewable DME, is really a unique product. And as we think about our industry making a shift to renewable, we have to kind of shift our mindset and not think about commodity LPG. Every one of those is going to have a unique carbon intensity. They're going to be more or less renewable or electrified or recyclable, or they'll have different definitions. And how we take that to market will be different. I liken it to, you know, a cup of coffee. If I go buy coffee at the corner bakery, maybe it costs this much. If I go buy it at Starbucks, I have to stop and take out a loan before I buy my coffee. You know, so the products will all be different, and how we take that to the market will be different, and it opens up a world of opportunities.
Thanks, Sinch. Pedro, you gave us a great introduction. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we get into the general discussions?
No, I think we can go directly to the general discussions.
Okay, perfect. Great. Let me start with you, Juan Francisco. Your project, as I understand it, it's not up and running yet, but it should be by the end of this year. You should be starting to get some production. Is that right? I'd like to understand some idea in terms of the potential for volumes, okay, from this process or this geography, because it may be more than just that process, but also beyond that, because I can just anecdotally, we're going to be holding our event in India in a few weeks' time. The Indian government has a massive plan for hydrogen development, green hydrogen development. They want to produce, I think, 5,000 tons a year by the end of the decade, and beyond that, they're going to go further, of course. They also want to produce it. Their target is $1,000 a ton, so $1 a kilo. And they put great store in this. They think this is the future for them, and I think many governments around the world are looking at green hydrogen. But there's a question about whether it's really viable, whether we've got the infrastructure to produce it. But the other thing is, what do you do with green hydrogen? Since you mentioned that this is an opportunity for us, perhaps with DME as a carrier, but I would like to ask you how you see the potential for green hydrogen to become a precursor to synthetic propane, and what you think potential volumes could be around the world. And if you could expand on this, because I think it's a really important point.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. It's a very big question, because I think that the potentials, you need two things. I mean, if we keep in synthetic renewable, that is the competition, I mean the competitivity, and how to replicate it in the rest of the world. I mean, to replicate it, it is, I will not say easy, because a lot of technical people will kill me if I say easy, but you know, you have a plant that, I mean, you need a renewable, competitive source of electricity, and you can use the same plant, and the location will define which is the renewable electricity available and the price of it. So definitely we can start in Magallanes with a very good aeolic wind and aeolic energy. I mean, one of the best resources in the world. But then you can go to other places with other renewable energies, like sun in the desert, in Australia, in the United States as well. So it's a plan where the potential is huge, because, I mean, and I will say that you mentioned the hydrogen, and I think it's really like, it's the same, I will say that. Because when you go to competitivity, I will say it's not easy in synthetic, but it's more clear. And that's why, because you start with a source of competitive renewable electricity, then you go to hydrogen, and then you go to LPG. And you don't only have to compete against the fossil competitor, but you have to compete with hydrogen and electricity. And you have to define, because each step, it will be an additional effort, additional cost, and of course, it's going to be more expensive, hydrogen than electricity, and renewable LPG than hydrogen. So you have to think that what you gain in each stage, and definitely we know it. I mean, I think in this industry, it's quite easy to understand why our product, LPG, can compete against electricity to the natural gas, because we are gaining some characteristics that are very valuable, especially if you don't know, I mean, if you only see the production cost, of course, it's more expensive. But when you go to the whole logistic, storage, for example, flexibility, to get to isolated places, as we see yesterday, I mean, if you compare LPG to hydrogen, I mean, hydrogen is very difficult to move, very risky. I mean, we have a lot of history in moving the LPG in a safety way. So that's why, and as as you say, could be LPG a great, or RDME, a great carrier of hydrogen, because I will say that it's the same. I mean, in some cases, you will be able to use directly the electricity. In some cases, you will be able to use directly the hydrogen. And in a lot of other cases, that is quite a natural market for us, the LPG industry, to move it as a renewable LPG. So.
Go ahead, please.
One thing I just want to build on, because I think it's kind of a funny story. When I was at the Propane Education and Research Council, we were having conversations with Argonne National Laboratory, which is a respected national lab in the United States, and the researcher, a very esteemed and recognized researcher, we were talking to them about LPG to hydrogen reforming, and it became kind of a joke, because every time we would talk, he went on and on and on about how transportable LPG is. And we started to laugh, because we're like, how many times is he going to tell us how he appreciates the transportability? So it's a huge advantage for our industry.
Okay, we've got DME and we've got synthetic LPG, both coming essentially, well, the ability to take hydrogen and then be a hydrogen carrier. Between the two of you, what's the most attractive option? What do the economics look like? Is it better to run the hydrogen, green hydrogen, into DME and then transport it? Or is it better to put it into synthetic propane? Do you have any idea on that? I mean...
So let's start. Okay. Well, in the case of the technology that we are seeing today in synthetic LPG, we have a similar issue with the bio LPG, that we are attached to the production of gasoline. So that's the big issue with our synthetic renewal. So yes, the potential have a cap. That is, okay, we are going to be, we don't know yet exactly the number, around 10, 20, 25% of the relation within gasoline and LPG. So I think that is the big problem with us. So there you can go to DME that you have, well, I will let you speak about DME, but I think that LPG is a renewable LPG is a very good option when you are in a whole system, and of course you need the gasoline, you need jet fuels, you need, and then you will have the LPG and you can market it. But if not, if you want to have 100%, I will let you talk about.
No, I think the answer is it's both and not either or. You talk about the projections that WLPGA has done, that we can get to 50% or over 50% renewable LPG, and we need to definitely work very hard to reach those targets and beyond. But there's still another 50% that needs to be addressed, and that's where things like renewable DME can come in and help us meet those targets and stay relevant in 2050 and beyond. And one of the real advantages, one of the things that I think is very attractive about renewable LPG and renewable DME both, is it does allow us as an industry to perhaps decouple from some of the supply chains where we're a byproduct of oil refining or natural gas fracking or whatever it may be. All of a sudden, we control the feedstock, the production process, and the fuel. We own the supply chain. We're no longer beholden to another industry. So I think it's a both and we need all the options. And then that's true for the green energy transition as a whole. It's going to take everything to make sure that everyone has affordable, accessible, the A words that you talked about, and that we have that for everyone in the future.
Thanks, Senj, and Juan Francisco. Pedro.
Please don't ask about hydrogen to me, okay?
Really?
Yeah, I'm learning here.
I think you put it in your slides. I won't ask you about hydrogen. My question for you is more, I think it's more business orientated, let's say. Right now, there's a green premium for renewable LPG. It costs more to produce, and it's difficult sometimes to pass that on to consumers. So, a couple of questions. One, do you believe that in the long term, consumers are going to be prepared to pay a significant premium for the renewable product? And I mean, not just the certain segments of society that are perhaps not so price sensitive, but the full segment, the full customer base. And linked to that, what do you believe the role of government should be? If you look at the development of renewable electricity, there was a huge amount of government subsidies going into that in the early days because it was very difficult to get it to start. Do we need government support to get it to a volume? Or, on the other hand, do we need government regulation to force consumers to pay more? So the two parts to that question around government.
Okay. Well, first, let's talk about the consumers, okay? I think nowadays, we already have people that are able to pay more for the products. I mean, I can say that people in poor countries that use the LPG to cook, they will pay more if it's a renewable LPG than a fossil fuel LPG. But I think that some companies, they have really hard pressure about ESG terms, they are able to pay more. If it's a raw material that don't cost a lot to them, so there is a huge chance that they are looking for some energetics that are renewable. So when you talk about mining, like mining, they use sometimes natural gas, they use LPG in the production, in their production. They have like a lot of trucks over there. And I think it's a type of client that we should look at. But you have many of them. But I think we should start in the bulk sector than in the cylinder sector. The other thing that we have to think about is how to market the product. You know, we are not gonna separate the renewable LPG from the fossil LPG. You're gonna do the blend, but you have to track who is gonna consume and how much you bought or how much you produce of renewable LPG. So I think nowadays we already have this market. We don't have the product. And it's a question of time that we are matched both things. In terms of what government could do for the ramp up of the renewable LPG, I think they have a big role here. It's, as I mentioned during my presentation, we don't have the same balance sheet that the downstreams company have. We have to make huge investments in order to produce renewable LPG. And it is expensive. And if we can produce without having any subsidies or any tax cuts, it's going to be very tough to ramp up the production. So I think if the government have if they are looking for the environment, if they are looking for ESG, they should help the industry in order to produce more, ramp up, and create a market. But once we start, once we find the right pathway to produce the renewable LPG, I think the market will solve, and we will sell these. We can produce this cheaper and reach the customers with the same price of the fossil fuel LPG.
Okay, so if I understand, perhaps there's a role for government in the initial phases, but as we get to scale, we should be able to produce it at a competitive price with at least what the market will be prepared to bear. Juan Francisco, you any comments on that?
I mean, yes, I think from the side of regulation, of course, they are very useful. Those specific action to promote this project. For example, today in our project, we are using a lot the several incentives that the Chilean law have for research and development, and they're very useful. But I think that in the long term, what we need from the authority is stability, because when we are talking about renewable projects, big renewable projects, they're very capital intensive. So it's not necessarily a subsidy for demand, because I totally agree that the first consumers are going to be more industrial bulk consumers who probably, I mean, energy is not a big issue in the balance sheet, but their customer, they're really going to like a net zero product, for example. So for them, maybe we don't need in the consumption, but we need in the long term to be known the rules. I mean, the rates for financing this project. I mean, they're capital-intensive projects, so the long-term stability, they are very valuable, and that is something that we really need. I mean, in the long terms.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to ask you as well, Cinch, your opinion in terms of government and what government should be doing and what shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, so it's really difficult to, as they mentioned, to produce renewable LPG, renewable DME that's cost competitive with fossil fuels. And that's just the nature of it. If you look at the history of mankind and what's done the most social good for the world, you know, maybe it's the invention of the wheel, the discovery of fire, and cheap, affordable, ubiquitous fossil energy. And the transition away from that, I think, is going to be difficult. It's going to be, you know, in many cases, painful. Painful for countries, painful for industries, companies, and people. So that transition, it will take government support. I really believe it will. You just can't snap your finger and have a whole new source of energy for a global economy that's built on fossil energy.
Okay, thanks. And getting that government support is going to be an important role for the associations, I would think. That's something that we need to look at. I'm going to throw it open to the audience here. Is anybody out there that has a question? If you do have, I'm not sure on the protocol for this, but you can come up to the front here and you can take my microphone. So, anybody want to ask a question to these people? Come on. Do we have somebody there? I don't. Okay, thank you.
We spoke here about many areas of this technology, this beautiful technology. I wanted to understand. I am from remote control technology, and we are providing the telemetry systems or the IoT technology for LPG. I would like to ask, here in Latin America or in the Americas, what is the position of this technology? Are we in the way to develop the technology? How advanced we are? I mean, we know that in Europe is very strong, the technology, but I have seen that in Latin America there is not many development. What do you have to say about this?
Pedro, yes, please.
You mean about the system to track the cylinders? Yeah. Okay. So, in my opinion, this system used to be expensive for the type of clients that we approach. I talk about Brazil, so I don't know very well about the other markets, but I can imagine it's more or less the same. So, if you focusing in a rich country, they are able to pay more to receive the product just in time, etc. Because in Brazil you have a very cost-sensitive clients, they prefer to have the pain to see the cylinders empty and call for a reseller and receive these, and we provide very fast the cylinder, then pay like, I don't know, 15 reais per month in order to have this type of service. I think like we made research about that, we invest on that as well, but as bio LPG and renewable LPG, it's a cost problem.
Okay, I don't think this is really related to renewable, if I understand the question correctly.
No, it's not.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, I will have some more questions for the panel here myself. Yes, over here, please. Can we have a microphone?
Okay, thanks. what share of the total energy market, I mean electric generation, industrial, commercial, and domestic, can be covered with LP and LPG and in the world, and especially in Colombia?
Did any of you understand the question?
I think he's talking about the name of the product, LPG or LP. Is that? No?
I asked about if you know the total energy production in the world, and here in Colombia, I mean electric generation, commercial use, industrial use, domestic cooking use. We are talking about LPG these 2 days. So which share or how many can be covered with LPG and LG in the world are here in Colombia, like a clean energy, I mean?
You want to have a stab at
No,
that?
no, I just would say that probably the best is to talk about the work that the association did in Europe.
Look, LPG is about 2.5% of primary energy, okay? We believe that we can convert 50% of that by 2050 to renewable. So if you do the maths, it's maybe 1 or 2% of total primary energy could be served with renewable propane by 2050. I can't really say too much about how that compares with total electricity or natural gas, and I don't have the information specifically for Colombia, I'm afraid, but maybe one of the Colombian colleagues can answer that. I have a question down here, please.
Yes, thank you, James. The question is for Sinch. If he can explain how is the process of obtaining DME from waste, briefly, and in a simple way for close to a lawyer.
I'm not even a lawyer, so it'll be very simple, and I'm certainly not an engineer. So our preferred pathway is to take organic wastes, and we love animal manure, which is kind of a weird statement, but that's what we really like to take. We anaerobically digest that, capture the hydrogen and the CO2 off of that, clean that, and then we go through a two-step process that takes the biogas, that raw biogas that comes off the waste. We take it through methanol, so we have a checkpoint in the middle, and then we convert the methanol to renewable DME. And then that renewable DME goes into the market. One thing that, so that's kind of the answer to that question. One thing that is interesting as we go through that process is that waste has different carbon intensities. And some of the, especially animal manure, can be very carbon negative because you're avoiding the greenhouse gas emissions that you smell when you go by an animal farm. So as we look at a target of net zero, we have the potential at using wastes, and we could make the case with regulators and governments that, hey, we're using waste products, we're avoiding emissions, so it's actually a negative carbon impact to offset other products that are positive carbon impact. But beyond waste, organic wastes, municipal solid waste is a very good feedstock. Forestry waste, renewable methanol, electrolyzed hydrogen plus captured CO2 is a great product as well. We're kind of feedstock or waste agnostic, but if you've got hydrogen and you've got carbon, we can take it through the process.
Okay. I have a question for the panel. We see other competitors out there that are looking for the same molecules. So you mentioned, Pedro, you mentioned that the refiners are recycling renewable propane back into their process as an energy source, which stops it from coming out to the market. We also see in most of the world, I'm sure, but certainly in Europe, the petrochemical companies are very keen on renewable feedstock. There's a certain, they've been mandated to have a certain percentage of renewable feedstock. So there's a strong competition coming from that segment as well for renewable propane, synthetic propane, or what have you. My question to all of you is, do we see the petrochemical industry as a threat? Or should we perhaps see them as an ally, as a partner? After all, the the core business of a petrochemical company is the manufacture of chemicals or gases. It's not the core business of the LPG distribution business. So is it not better to task the petrochemical companies with solving this problem, and we just become an off-taker from them? So what are your thoughts?
No, look, Mike, I think nowadays we are in the same situation with the fossil LPG and the raw materials that they need to their production. So for sure, we will compete to be off-taker. But in terms of technology, in terms of R&D, and in terms of the size of the petrochemical companies and the know-how that they have in order to produce, I'm completely sure that they can be an ally here. So it's very important to the LPG producers or distributor to be near them, to understand what they did already and try to copy. Yeah. So I think in terms of where we are right now, it's better to have them as an ally.
Well, I think that more than competition or ally, I think that we have to think in our core business really, because our core business is to create value at the end. So if we create more value at the end, so we can compete, because we're competing with other users. So we have to find those customers the customers of our customer really value the green attribute, and we have to find those places where the attributes of LPG are really valuable. For example, yesterday you show a picture of one of our projects. That is the floating generation set that we have in the salmon industry. If you think in those kind of application, what you can put offshore? I mean, you need something that is reliable, that have a very high energy density. Every day, the salmon industry is getting more and more offshore, so you will need our attribute. And the customer, and they export most of the production, so their customers really value that the product is have a lower footprint. So I think that more than that, to fight at the beginning, we should try to create value at the end, where we can create a lot of value, and that is our battle.
Thank you. Since you're not Oberon's not a distributor of fuel like an LPG company. You're something in between. You're actually a manufacturer of gases. What are your thoughts about that question?
Yeah, so I think absolutely they can be a partner. It's an opportunity for us as an industry. And to give a very real example, just a few weeks ago I had a conversation with a company in California, and I can't say their name, so I'll call them the California Oil and Gas Company. And they were literally called XYZ Oil and Gas. They've since, in the 3 weeks since, changed their name to California Energy, because they know they need to move to renewable. And their conversation with us was, can you provide us renewable DME? And they would equally be interested in renewable LPG to provide heat to their distillation tower, because they're under so much environmental pressure. They need to look for every opportunity to lower the carbon footprint of their oil and gas processes. So there's opportunities for them to be customers for renewable LPG, renewable DME, and they were also very interested in renewable hydrogen that we could transport in the renewable DME molecule that they could use in their process. So besides being an opportunity to perhaps take their feedstock or take their waste and turn it into our product, we can also provide them products. So I think their collaboration is king. Or queen, whatever your preference.
Fantastic. Okay. Look, I've got one eye on the time here, and it's turned orange. We're getting close to the end here, and I know that we've got another session to come. So I'd like to just leave you all with a final question. There are plenty of companies in this room who probably are interested, to understand what's happening with renewable LPG, but they don't perhaps feel that they have any action to take. It'll happen by somebody else will do it. They'll be able to buy it one day because somebody else is going to take the lead. Each of you, what do you think an LPG company in the world should do? What action should they take in the context of renewable LPG? the main action that each company should take, no matter what size they are. Let me start on this end. Sinch.
So two things. I think one is be involved, attend conferences like this, the WLPGA, and I'll kiss up to James a little bit here, but WLPGA is doing excellent work leading the global LPG industry forward on the renewable path. And I think look at opportunities to be involved with that organization, as well as your local associations. And then the other thing is there are already companies making moves. You see it in the news. Big LPG companies are doing things, and so I would say talk to the companies that are doing things in renewable, and ask how you can get involved. We have a program where we'll work with companies to help bring them along, knowing that there's limited renewable molecules today, but you have to be ready to adopt them.
Well, I think that each company should, as Pedro shows, there's a lot of alternative for renewables LPG. And each company should try to look for what is best for them, try to find those customers that can really value that product, because you have to develop this product from zero. In some cases, it could be very a drop-in fuel, or with a certain blend amount. But but that is the short term. But in the middle, long term, it's going to be the value of the market that we know. The LPG market, is very well situated to develop this product. And it's better to start looking now, because now it's going to be easy to start with a small blend, with a small quantity, to find those premium customers. But in the middle term, we have to go to 0 to 100. That's something that we have to do for the next 20, 30 years.
Okay, thank you. Pedro.
So, in my opinion, first, it's a race, and a race that already started. So, even if the company is starting making the investments on that, and the thing's gonna happen quite fast. So, if your competitor is already investing, you don't want to be in a situation that the product is from your competitor. He's going to be verticalized. So if you are a downstream company, make an investment on that, is the first takeaway here. The second one is nothing against Europe and America, but you have good brands here in Latin America as well. So do partnership with universities. We need to create this mass of people who understand our products, who are gonna, each country have different feedstocks, each country have different logistics. So do partnership with universities, put the universities together with the companies. We don't do this a lot here, but we have to do this, not just for our company, but for our countries as well. Okay.
Great. So we have yes. The very last question, please.
Okay, you just mentioned about the costs and the efforts for the industry to develop this type of technology. Having said that, I would like to understand, at least in a sense or in a range, what are the incremental costs of a ton or a kilo for a user at the moment with the current information we have? Or what do we expect about what will be the incremental cost of a user of this type of product? Could you share us something, or what information do you have?
Is there somebody that can give a very quick answer on this? If not, because I've got this red light flashing at me, and I'm very aware of that. So, quick answer on this?
I have no idea. So,
a very quick answer, and it's a terrible answer, is it depends. There are high volume, high carbon intensity processes that can get to near parity. There are low carbon, very renewable processes that are, or negative carbon that are going to cost more, maybe twice as much. But it depends.
I'm going to call it a day here, because we've reached the end of the time. My takeaway from this is clearly that renewables is the name of the game. It is the big thing that our industry has to embrace. I hear it's a race, and in any race, you don't want to get left behind. So I think all of you out there, you have to get involved. At the very least, inform yourselves on what is happening and what needs to be done. WLPG is a great source of information for that, so please, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to discuss that with you. With that, I'd like to thank the panel, so a big round of applause, please, for everybody here.